It's 1993, and inside a Denny's on Berryessa Road in East San Jose, three engineers are hunched over coffee cups doing something that sounds almost like a joke. They are trying to figure out how to build a chip for a market that does not really exist yet. Two of them, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem, are chip designers who have just left Sun Microsystems. The third is a 30-year-old engineer named Jensen Huang, and before he ever wrote a line of code for a living, he bussed tables and washed dishes at a Denny's like this one as a teenager in Oregon. Now he's sitting in a booth co-founding a company none of them can fully explain yet, betting that computer graphics, not general computing, is where the next fortune is hiding. The company they named that year is Nvidia. Nobody in that booth could have guessed that 3 decades later it would become the most valuable company that has ever existed. You are watching American Electronics and Tech, where we take these companies apart down to the chip and the person who bet everything on it. If origin stories like this one grab you, subscribe and stick around, because Nvidia's road to the top ran directly through 2 separate near-death experiences, and the man in the booth almost lost the company twice before the world figured out what he was actually building. Jensen Huang was born in Tainan, Taiwan, in 1963. As a child, he was sent, along with his older brother, to live with relatives in the United States while political unrest churned across parts of Asia. He landed, by a strange twist, at a boarding school in rural Kentucky that turned out to be a reform school, where his roommate was covered in knife scars. He mopped bathrooms there to earn his keep before the family reunited in Oregon. He studied electrical engineering at Oregon State, then picked up a master's from Stanford while working as a chip designer at LSI Logic and Advanced Micro Devices. By the time he reached that Denny's booth in 1993, he had spent a decade learning how silicon actually got made. What he had not learned yet was how close a company could come to disappearing entirely. Nvidia's first product, released in 1995, was called the NV1. It bet on a graphics technique called quadratic texture mapping instead of the polygon-based approach the rest of the industry was quietly converging on. Sega licensed it for a version of the Saturn console. The bet was wrong. Microsoft's incoming Direct 3D standard used polygons. Developers hated coding for the NV1's approach, and the product flopped commercially. By 1996, Nvidia had roughly enough money left to last a month, and Huang cut the staff by more than half. He also made a decision that would define the company's culture for the next 30 years. Rather than defend the choice that was failing, he told the surviving engineers to throw out the plan and build for where the industry was actually headed, not where Nvidia wished it was headed. The result was the Revo 128, released in 1997, built for Direct 3D from the ground up. It sold 1 million units in 4 months and pulled the company back from the edge. Nvidia went public 2 years later, in January 1999, and that same year released the GeForce 256, a chip the company marketed using a term almost nobody had used before, the graphics processing unit, or GPU. The word stuck to the entire industry. Nvidia had not just survived its own near collapse. It had renamed the category it had almost died trying to invent. For most of the 2000s, Nvidia's story was a familiar one in Silicon Valley. A hardware company chasing gamers, competing bitterly with ATI and later AMD over who could render frames faster. But in 2006, Huang made a decision that baffled Wall Street analysts and irritated his own board. Nvidia released something called CUDA, a software platform that let ordinary programmers run general-purpose calculations on a graphics chip instead of just rendering pixels. There was no obvious market for it. Wall Street pressed Huang for years about why the company kept spending money, reportedly close to $1 billion annually at points, on software nobody outside a handful of research labs seemed to want. Huang's answer, repeated in interview after interview, was that GPUs were secretly parallel computers, and that someday an application would arrive that needed millions of simple calculations happening at once. He did not know exactly what that application would be. He just kept funding the bet. The application arrived in pieces, not all at once. Crypto miners discovered around 2013 that GPUs were extraordinarily good at the repetitive math behind Bitcoin mining, and Nvidia rode that wave up and then crashed hard when it collapsed, writing off unsold inventory in 2018 in a stock plunge that erased tens of billions in value in a single week. But buried inside that same decade was the real answer to Huang's bet. In 2012, a team of researchers at the University of Toronto trained a neural network called AlexNet on Nvidia GPUs and blew past every other entry in an image recognition competition, a result widely cited as the moment deep learning stopped being an academic curiosity. CUDA was not designed for artificial intelligence. It simply happened to be the only mature toolkit ready when artificial intelligence needed massively parallel computation, and researchers everywhere started building on it, because switching to anything else meant starting over. The crypto bust of 2022 gutted Nvidia's stock and forced another painful inventory write-down, and for a moment it looked as though the company might be staring down a smaller version of the crisis it survived in 1996. Then, in November 2022, OpenAI released a chatbot called ChatGPT, and within months, every major technology company on Earth was scrambling to buy the one chip capable of training systems like it: Nvidia's H100. Data center revenue, which had been a modest side business, exploded past the company's gaming division and kept climbing. Huang, by then instantly recognizable at keynotes in his black leather jacket, found himself describing artificial intelligence infrastructure as the largest industrial build-out in human history, and for once the number backed him up. Nvidia crossed a $1 trillion market capitalization in 2023. It crossed $2 trillion, then $3 trillion. On July 9, 2025, it became the first publicly traded company in history to close above $4 trillion, a threshold most economists would have called science fiction a decade earlier. Through 2026, its valuation has swung as high as roughly $5.5 trillion, driven by hyperscalers signing multi-year chip contracts and Huang pledging tens of billions more in new fabrication investment in Taiwan, the island he left as a child. There is a version of this story where the CUDA decade looks obvious in hindsight, where a decade of unexplained losses reads as visionary instead of reckless. That reading is only available because the bet worked. Honest history has to hold the other version too, the one where Huang spent $1 billion a year on a platform almost nobody used, defended a slow-burning research project through years of investor skepticism, and could easily have been remembered as the CEO who nearly sank a graphics company chasing software nobody wanted. He has been wrong before. The NV1 proved that. What changed between 1996 and 2012 was not that Huang stopped taking risks. It was that one of them, held long enough without flinching, turned out to be the biggest bet in the history of the semiconductor industry. Today, Nvidia employs close to 40,000 people, and its chips sit inside nearly every large AI model being trained anywhere on the planet, from hyperscale data centers in Virginia to research labs in Beijing that officially cannot buy the newest versions. The company that once begged Sega and Direct 3D developers to take its graphics chips seriously now has hyperscalers prepaying years in advance just to guarantee a place in line. If you were gaming on a GeForce card in the 2000s, mining crypto on an Nvidia rig in 2017, or you've just watched this company's valuation numbers stop making intuitive sense over the last 3 years, drop the year you first heard the name Nvidia in the comments. Subscribe if you want more of these companies taken apart down to the chip.